Welcome on in to the First Round Fantasy Podcast. You're home for second round advice. Gabriel Maramontes joined by Justin Morsaz and Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and Trey Lance. We got special guests on today's pod. How you doing, Joe?
It's been a while, boys. How you guys doing?
Man, it's been a while for me too, but luckily we've had Justin here holding down the fort, the commission ship. Jacob Bartley, he's out today, but Justin, you've been holding down the fort with him. How you doing?
Yeah, I mean, you guys haven't been on in a while. We missed you, but me and Jake have been doing the damn thing right, so it's been all right. But I need to get some new opinions in here because Jacob's, he's good and all, but too much Niner talk.
I was gonna say, dude, don't trash him on his own podcast, man.
No.
Wait till after the show, dude.
I just wanted him to hear that because the Trey Sermon love has finally left, I think, from everybody. So we're not talking about that anymore.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I think Joe and I had talked about Trey Sermon and Eli Mitchell the rest of the season, and I know you weren't willing to bet because you don't bet on your Niners, but I knew you were leaning Mitchell, and it looks like it's gonna be that way. And I was on the Sermon side, but anyways, like Justin said, no more talk. Like I said, I'm Gabriel Maramontes, Justin Morsaz, Joe Morsaz. I got the brothers here with me today. Jacob will be back next week. If you haven't already, go follow us where you can. That's First Round Fantasy at Twitter, First Round Fantasy at Instagram, and First Round Fantasy on Facebook. You can find us there. Who's wearing the merch today? Justin is. He was showing it earlier. And then Joe's got his own kind of merch.
I like that. That's the new one.
Oh, is that the merch right there?
No, this is Stevie. He's a YouTuber. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. Now we're plugging Stevie's work. It's all good, man. Joe, you also got the cards there. Let's show some love again, man. Let's see those beautiful cards. If anyone out there is a card fanatic, comment in the chat, man.
I got the best quarterbacks in the league right here. We start out with our boy Herb. We start out with our boy Trey Lance on the pink parallel. We go to our boy Josh Allen, the best quarterback in the league. And then we finish it off with some Kyler action. All rookies, all out pick. Let's go.
So let me ask you this. What's the most valuable card in that hand right there?
Oh, no question.
The Josh.
Yeah, how much does that go for?
$150?
No, it's up to like 180, 200 now, actually, after his last few weeks. So,
all right.
He's the Giannis of this year, man. He's balling out.
I know.
Joe, next question. What's your address?
I'll show off
for anybody
Josh
who's
real
curious.
Quick. The rookie patch, my guy, with the silver. So,
I'll take for that.
I went big on Josh Allen in the card game actually this last summer, and it's paying off a little bit.
Well, we're all happy for you. And in basketball, we know you hit with that Giannis Antetokounmpo card too. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We will get into the sits of the week. We will get into our dark horses of the week. But before we do, we're going to talk a little bit about the bye week blues, fellas. The first wave of bye weeks are upon us. That's the Falcons, the Saints, the Jets, and the Niners. That's a lot of fantasy relevant people there. Especially with the emergence of guys like Cordell Patterson, the 49ers backfield, Kamara, maybe no one on the Jets.
Debo.
Debo. Sorry, he's like, what, number 2 overall right now? He's crazy good.
That's the one I'm most sad
and
about.
Look, man, the Jets aren't great, but I've seen in our leagues people start Corey Davis. I've seen people start Crowder. I've seen even some desperation Michael Carter.
And he did good last week. So,
yeah, he's actually getting better and better every week. I think coming off the bye, he's a guy to target.
Yeah. So I guess my first question, guys, because again, I think next week is like the monster wave. There's like 6 teams next week going on bye. But let's focus on this week and just bye weeks in general. Is that something that you kind of plan for when you go into like your draft at the beginning of the year? Because I'll tell you first, straight up, that is not what I used to do. And one year I had Tom Brady, Julian Edelman, and Gronk on the same team, as well as I think it was like LaShawn McCoy and someone else on the Eagles. And they were all starters in my lineup, and they all had buys on the same week. And I had never been so screwed in my life sitting 7 guys that I usually start on my bench. So ever since then, I've always taken into account bye weeks, but sometimes talent just overrides all of that stuff. What do you guys think, and how do you plan accordingly? I'll start with you, Joe.
Yeah, talent definitely is the number one thing. So I will say that in our Dynasty League, I had Kirk, and it's a super flex. I had Kirk Cousins, Josh Allen, Herbert. All 3 of them obviously are week 7 buys. And I traded Kirk Cousins for Tua in another package. I got some other stuff back, but I didn't mind that because I'm not going to start Kirk over the other guys. So I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't trade my top end talent because of bye weeks. But if you can swap out maybe a bench piece for somebody else's bench piece, maybe they're going through a different bye week issue. I don't think it kills you. But listen, man, I think it's a catch-22. It's almost better to have all your guys out on bye week the same week, right? You know you're going to lose, but it's 1 week. It's 1 week, right? So you take the L for that 1 week, and then you go against other people who have bye weeks for week 9, which is another bad one, 10, So it's interesting. I don't really plan around it. Like I said, if I notice something crazy like I had in the Superflex where all 3 of my quarterbacks happen to be on it, I'll make a move. But I'm definitely not planning around it coming into the draft.
Yeah, fair enough. Justin, what are you thinking?
The only planning I do no draft day planning in regards. The only thing I do is when it comes to trades, I'll always try to trade for someone whose buy is already passed so I don't have to deal with that headache. And usually the other player isn't really paying attention to it. And if they are, it's not enough to sway it. It's like, yeah, everyone's got to deal with buys, whatever, but on your end, getting the player that's already done with the buy, that means you're smooth sailing for the rest of the year. Other than that, I just have to work with the motions that each week brings to me,
And that's a good point too, Justin, because one of the things that around this time of the year, right? So I'm like talking to somebody right now about a trade. Joe, number 2, if you're out here listening, we're talking about Hopkins. It's a trade that involves Hopkins and Mike Williams, right? And a lot of people look when you send those trades through Yahoo and they see Mike Williams has way more points. And that could be a huge blow-up week. In Mike Williams' case, he's been a certified baller. But when you're this early in the season and you're 5 weeks in, if a player misses a week, that's huge in terms of point relevancy, right? So Justin, if he goes and trades for a guy that's bye week has already passed, the player that he's offering may have more points. Not on average, but more points in general. And people look at that and they go, well, you're giving me a guy that has more points. Okay, deal. So you can actually get some real big steals like that.
Yep, I've definitely fallen victim to that before. And also, you guys both brought it up. That's a perfect strategy, too. Sometimes you keen in on those players that necessarily you don't have, but they are on their bye weeks. And then a few weeks later, you have a guy going on a bye, and you think to yourself, well, the player that I'm trading for, he's already had their bye. And I'm giving this guy away who I'm not going to be able to play this week. And some people will fall for that, too, because they want the bigger name. But in reality, you might be just strategic enough to kind of plan around it. So, yeah, all really good points, guys. All really good points. And hopefully out there, you are going to fare well with the bye week blues. As I said, it gets even tougher next week, but we'll deal with that demon when we get to it. Let's move on to some major injury news. And we're starting off with the man in the north, Russell Wilson. Sorry, that was another podcast reference. Had surgery on his finger. Looks like he's targeting a week 10 return. I guess the biggest question here, guys, DK and Lockett. What does their scenario now look like? I think both of those guys were kind of certified wide receiver ones, fringe guys that you could start week in and week out. Are you still feeling that way? Or are these guys probably cementing themselves outside the top 20? And I'll start there. If you think that's too low or too high, let it, speak now, forever hold your peace. But what is the concern for these guys? You're probably not going to be starting Geno Smith unless you're like in a dire need 12-team super flex or something bigger. But primarily DK and Lockett. Both guys have had their points, have had their moments this year. Both guys have been doing great. What do you think their future holds over the next 6 weeks? And are you looking to trade them? Justin, what do you think?
If you're trading him, you're going to trade him at a low for that reason, so I wouldn't do it. But I'm not worried about Metcalf at all because that dude's a safety blanket for any quarterback. He's humongous. And if you watch the game, even Lockett had 2 balls that were ready to go for 50-plus yard touchdowns. So I still like them both. I'm not going to bench them, but their ceilings are a little bit lower. But DK is going to stay top 15, top 12, but Lockett might drop maybe out of the 20. But he's never really been in there. He's just such a Tyreek Hill light. You can't start him. You can't sit him, but you'll never be surprised that he only drops like 10 or 8 points some weeks, So temper your expectations, but I can't sit any of them regardless.
Yeah, I like that comparison. The Tyreek Hill light. You know, he has these massive games, but then sometimes he'll just be schemed out entirely or ignored by Russell Wilson. But he'll win you weeks, and that's why you start him week in and week out. Joe, what do you think?
I don't know, man. I listen. Gino came in last week and he looked okay, right? You know, after the injury, he looked fine. And it's interesting because we haven't really seen a full season out of him since his first year in the league back in 2013. I mean, he played a good amount the next year. He was always able to put up yards. It's not like he was completely god awful, but you know, a 200-yard a game kind of a quarterback. It's really going to depend, man. I think that, like Justin said, Metcalf is definitely the guy to own. I think that we may see over the next couple of weeks, Gino is going to find which one of these guys he trusts more, and that's the guy to have. I'm leaning towards Metcalf, but I could see it go either way.
I mean, he might be the best backup quarterback in the league. Like, I can't count the rookies that were sitting out, but like him or Brissett, it's not too far off. Maybe Tyrod Taylor, but he started. He's a good backup quarterback. I like him. He's not awful.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's a good point. I like the comparison. Let's move on. Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, he wasn't doing much for fantasy, but we can say this with confidence. When Juju has been out, other players have done extremely well for fantasy on the Steelers. Afterly mentioned Chase Claypool. So with Juju likely finding himself out for the season, actually, no, that is confirmed. Out for the season. You have to be high on guys like Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. Deontay Johnson, people have always been high on. But let's focus more on Chase Claypool. This is a guy that when Juju was healthy, was playing. Chase Claypool, I think I looked at the stat the other day. He's only on the field like 60% of the time. And he's only being targeted on those deep, deep routes, which are good. And if he hits, he hits. But with Ben's shakiness thus far this year, there's concern there. But now with Juju out, Chase's role increases significantly. What do you guys think, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, look at you kind of hit it on the head when you said Juju really hasn't done anything. But the reality is that through the first 4 weeks, Juju had 8 targets, 7 targets, 4 targets, and 8 targets. So he's getting targets. So the reality is now those targets are going to go to Deontay and Claypool, who have done something with those targets when they're targeted, right? Mm-hmm. When Claypool gets 10 targets, he's huge. When Deontay gets 10 targets, he's a monster. So now it's almost guaranteed those guys are going to get 10 targets each. I like both of them. I'm trying to trade for both of them. Yesterday, in one of our leagues, DeMont traded for Deontay, and I had the opportunity to grab him as well, and I should have never passed on it. I like him as a top 15 the rest of the way easily, and a very good chance to maybe even sneak into the top 10, because if you just go and look at what he's done in the 4 weeks that he's played, he's super consistent, and he's an end zone threat. Even last week when he wasn't 100%, he still got that big touchdown and finished with 15 points. So, and we know that Deontay last year and to start the beginning of this year before he got hurt, he's a target monster. So now Juju's out. That's only going to increase. You know, Ben Roethlisberger is going to look to him 10, 15 times a game, honestly. And I can see him being, if he stays healthy, that's always been the knock on Johnson. But if he stays healthy, he can be a league winner.
Yeah, and you mentioned last week, too, only saw 2 targets, and he still had, like, a really good fantasy day. I think, like, 17, 18 points because he caught that 70-yard bomb. Deontay Johnson, just so great. What about Chase Claypool specifically? Want to talk more about that, Justin?
Yeah, this is the real winner for me. You know, I was really high on Claypool, and then Juju signed the contract, and it just, like, is a weird thing for me from all fronts. Like, let him go somewhere, be the main guy that he wants to be. Why are you tying up so much money in receivers when you have nice young guys in the back? But Claypool's gonna. I disagree. I think Johnson stays where he's at, and Claypool gets a major bump, like top 15 from him rather than Deontay. Because I don't know how much more you can pepper somebody with targets than Deontay's been getting. I mean, you give him 4 more, he's sitting at like an average of 16 targets a game. But Claypool, you go from 2, 3 to 7, 8, 9. Like, wow, that's going to be humongous for the boys. So to me, Deontay is a buy/sell, like just preference. But right now, Clay is a buy. But anyone who's paying attention is not going to give him up for cheap. So expect to pay.
And just to confirm, that's a buy as in BUY, correct?
Purchase. Yeah.
You know, there's some people out there that might have thought.
I mean, Claypool. Also, just talking about Juju, guys. He signed a 1-year deal with Pittsburgh, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're not. This isn't the dynasty segment of the show, but what's the outlook on him next year? You know, he's probably not coming back to Pittsburgh. Do we trust him? Let's say a team like, I don't know, Green Bay figures it out with Aaron Rodgers and goes and brings him in. I guess it depends on what team he's going to, but can you, after the last 2 years of what we've seen from Juju, and really since Antonio Brown has left, can you guys see a world where this guy's not even in the top 35, 40 wide receivers next year? We're not even talking about him.
Well, with me being the Juju heartthrob, I can gladly answer this. And I will say that, yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel for Juju Smith-Schuster. You know, you brought up the last 2 years, and yeah, they were daunting for him. He wasn't that great. I think when he was forced into that number one role last year, he wasn't successful at it. That doesn't mean that he can't be successful like he was before. So you mentioned Green Bay. Let's paint a perfect scenario where Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers do stay there. Well, then you throw a guy in there like Juju Smith-Schuster. Look what he did with Antonio Brown and Big Ben. Like, I love a scenario like that, and I think he can thrive. You throw him in another scenario where there's not a lot of weapons around him, like Las Vegas, because that was rumored this year before he signed that contract. I'd be worried for him. But if he finds himself in a nice, comfortable, solid wide receiver 2 role, and the only thing we have to think of here too is that he's still young. He's going to be like 24, 25 next year. So he'll be totally young, ready to play. He's going to heal up nicely from this shoulder injury. And I'm not worried about him. It does just kind of depend on where he lands.
Hey, the best situation for him, Godwin is under only for this year, right?
Ooh.
He's franchise tagged. He heads out. Brady goes and gets Antonio Brown's other buddy, where he had his best season ever playing off of Antonio Brown. I don't know. That's like what you're talking about. He needs some other pieces around
there's
him.
a lot of places too. Like, isn't in Buffalo? Isn't Emmanuel Sanders on a 1 year, or is he on a 2-year deal?
I think he's on a 1 year.
I think he's on a 1 year. Like, that could be another scenario. You know, any of those places where you have those star QBs and all those weapons, I think he fits good as a nice number 2 piece. Justin?
The thing about the Juju situation is he went back to a team with too many mouths to feed with a bad quarterback pretty much, and it's not looking good for him. So if you remember, Allen Robinson had bad quarterback after bad quarterback, and people stole him in drafts and won leagues because of it. Juju can be that guy if he finds the right situation next year, but you just have to have faith and roll dice a little bit on him, but he definitely has that potential.
I mean, I understand the sentiment there, and I won't spend too much time talking about Juju because obviously he's out. He's irrelevant this year. But the reality is Allen Robinson, nobody else thrived on those teams. For some reason, we are seeing that even though Ben Roethlisberger sucks, Najee Harris has been very fantasy relevant. Deontay Johnson has been very fantasy relevant, and Claypool has been fantasy relevant. They're producing 3 studs, and he seems like the odd man out, even when they're all healthy.
Too many mouths to feed.
Well, I will pull what Joe said from the record, and we'll pretend that we ended on what Justin said. Promising future for Juju Smith-Schuster. Let's move on. We have one more injury to talk about. That is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He'll likely find himself on the IR for a couple of weeks. With that being said, MCL sprain, by the way, last week before he went out, that was the biggest committee jump that team had ever made up until that point. I think each guy had like 4 carries at that point, and I'm talking about McKinnon and Damian Williams. So between the 2 of them, are you interested in either, or are you laying off of both, or are you scared that, you know, there's interest in a guy like Marlon Mack or, you know, whoever else might be out there on the market? Or is this just a situation you want to avoid now? Or because of that high-octane Chiefs offense, what piece do you want? Joe?
Damian Williams.
Daryl.
Listen, man, Clyde is...
Oh, Daryl Williams. Sorry.
I'm looking at my fantasy team. I got Damian and Daryl. I'm not even kidding. My dad is pretty good. Listen, Darrell Williams, man, he's younger. Look, I like McKinnon, and I think that he's going to factor into the pass game for sure. And I think that you can do worse if you have to throw a guy in there. Listen, Clyde is the most frustrating player in the NFL, man. This guy comes out, he has 2 straight weeks where he puts up damn near 20. He gets over 100 yards in both games. And this is coming after he fumbles 2 weeks in a row. And it's just like, as good as he's had his weeks, it feels like Miles Sanders last year, where Miles Sanders had some big breakout weeks, and you were like, oh, this is it. He's finally going to get it together. And he never did. And then the injury comes at literally the worst time for him. So I like Darrell at least for the next 2 weeks because there is some interest in Marlon Mack. I've heard that. Listen, I think that teams like the Chiefs in particular, they can go out and trade for a running back, but it takes time to learn those complex systems. It's like Latavius. Yes, Tyson was the guy the first 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden now Latavius is the guy. And yeah, he's not producing, but he's still the guy. And I think it's going to be the same scenario is that even if the Chiefs go out and get Marlon Mack, he's not going to come out of the gate week 1 and be the guy. It's going to be Darrell for this week. It's going to be probably Darrell for next week. And then if they have Mack, maybe it then becomes Mack and CH. We kind of know at this point that Clyde is not built to be an every down running back. And maybe it's better for him fantasy-wise if he's not used as that. Maybe it's better for him if he's used like DeAndre Swift, where he can be explosive when he does get the ball, but they have a Jamal Williams or Marlon Mack type who's really the one pounding the rock play after play.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Go ahead, Justin.
The definitely Williams over McKinnon, but if they sign Mack, it seems to me that the incentive to sign Mack is the same reason that the Cardinals signed Connor. You just got a big body, rush it in for a touchdown, and that's going to be the most fantasy relevant running back for that team. So if Mack goes, I want Mack. If Clyde comes back, I'd rather have Clyde than any other guy. But right now, Williams over McKinnon. McKinnon's just going to be a change of pace, third down.
Yeah, I like what both of you guys have to say. And you brought up the situation about Latavius Murray and Baltimore. We can draw something specifically from Kansas City last year when they brought in Le'Veon Bell. Was it last year? I don't even remember because he was so irrelevant. Well, it's just that he was just irrelevant. Like everyone thought, oh, he's coming off a rocky year from the Jets. He's going to be solid. And it's like, he was obviously washed up at that point. But that's just kind of a closer to home scenario in that he never really figured it out. And that backfield was kind of weird for the rest of the season. I mean, Clyde figured it out, I think, the last 4 or 5 games. But I don't know. It's a situation I kind of want to avoid. If I had to pick anyone, like Joe said, for the viewers at home, Darrell Williams is definitely the guy. People probably aren't even picking up McKinnon. So he's definitely a shot that you can just stash and see what happens if you have the room to take it on.
And it's interesting what you said about Clyde. Like last year, he was essentially a league winner in some cases, right? Because towards the end of the season, he figured it out. He was putting up 25 points per game. So I still think that he hasn't even unlocked his full potential because coming out of college, he was a pass-catching back. And he was getting paired with Patrick Mahomes, who was supposed to be that little dump-off safety blanket and explosive player. They haven't used him like that. They've used him like 20 carries, 2 targets. It doesn't make sense what they're doing. So I still have high hopes for the guy. I mean, come on, he's in his 2nd season. It's an MCL sprain. It's not a tear. He'll be fine. I wouldn't sell him unless you have to.
If they sign Mack, I want to buy both of them pretty much because he's going to turn into he's going to turn better. He's going to turn into McKissick on crack, I think. So that's the hope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I think that's it for injuries. We'll end on that. Let's talk about waiver wire pickups really quick here. We touched on Darrell Williams. There's a guy out there, Khalil Herbert, Kadarius Toney, who I know Joe is very high on. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Quintez Cephas went down. He'll be out a few weeks, so that presents some opportunities for him if you want to touch a Lions backfield or a wide receiver. Hunter Henry. He's a guy that I just picked up off of waivers last week as a bye week fill-in. He finally showed some life last week. Hopefully that carries over. And then obviously with the talk about Marlon Mack, he's someone else you want to touch on. Now, obviously waivers might have already processed. So guys, any of these guys you super fancy about or you want to touch on one? Justin, you're shaking your head. Let's take a time to talk about a few of these guys if you want to.
spoke about Marlon. I think he's a stash if you have a roster spot for a potential win later move. But my favorite out of all this is Amon-Ra, because if you watch the lines, and if you do, I'm sorry, but anyways, he had a nice week 2 weeks ago, 8 targets, 6 catches, 70 yards, and that was his first good week, relevant, flex worthy week. And you're like, all right, he's a rook. Let's see if he puts it together. Almost identical week this week. So I think he's moved into that Jared Goff number one wide receiver, and a number one wide receiver on the Lions is like borderline flex, so it's not amazing, but huge potential for mid-season moves, and you should get him even after the waivers. What do we notate right here? 3%. It went up to 16%, so he's still available in so many leagues, and I love it as a bye week fill. I love it as a week where you need a flex and also a trade kicker because he's holding some value now.
Oh, how the weeks turn into darkness for some players. I just tried to trade Justin before the podcast. Everyone likes to talk about a guy like Hawkinson, TJ Hawkinson, right? Tight end, the guy that was a stud. He was a stud the first 2 weeks. He's had a few downers since then. And I think that's kind of why, he came out and said it in an interview himself. Teams are scheming against me. They know I'm one of the only options on this team. And I think by him publicly acknowledging that, and then we obviously seeing it as viewers of these games, Jared Goff is forced to find receivers. It's just a matter of how desperate are you to put a flyer out on one of them. And I think, Justin, you played the case well for a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So hopefully it works out if you're in a deeper league. I don't think you need to take shots on him in the 10-man league anytime soon. Joe, do you have a specific guy, or I know you're the Tony guy? What do you got? Man?
Well, notably, you guys missed Devontae Booker off this list.
Oh my goodness! Well, biggest, it was known.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. My guy, obviously, man. I'm not even gonna. It's Tony. And listen, I picked him. I drafted him in Dynasty, and then I picked him up in my league. And then in our Beers League, I picked him up, and I'm such an idiot because DeMont dropped Brandon Ayuk, and I picked up Brandon Ayuk and dropped Tony. And
you said this was Dynasty? Sorry.
No.
This is just regular.
Beers.
Okay.
And my thought was Kittle on IR, and Lance coming in, and Ayuk is going to finally get it together. And, of course, what happens? Kadarius Toney blows up, and Ayuk does nothing. I really didn't want to drop him, but it just that's the way a cookie crumbled. Listen, man, this guy is electric, okay? And New York just lost Saquon. New York just lost Galladay. We've got Sterling Shepard and Slayton both dealing with hamstring injuries, and these are guys that have, since they've come into the league, dealt with hamstring injuries and ankle injuries and knee injuries. So look, Kadarius Toney is going to be, and I'm going to declare it right now, the wide receiver, the rookie wide receiver to own outside of Jamar Chase this year. And Devontae Smith has been great, and I think that Waddle has been great. And one thing that we fail to realize is that Kadarius Toney, who got no talk all summer, was the number 20th pick. And we go back to what I used to reference all the time. If you go and look at his coming into the draft, what they ranked him as, he only went 5 picks after guys like CeeDee Lamb, guys. He is potential to be an elite guy. The reason that we thought, no, not this year, was because there were so many mouths to feed in New York.
And we just thought the team was bad, too.
Yeah, but, it was just, hey, there's Engram and 4 wide receivers and Saquon, and nobody's going to bust out. Well, now look, the herd has thinned out, and Tony is standing. And I like Tony and Shepard on that roster, so I would have spent the number 1 waiver wire on Tony. So, I mean, and literally over Darrell, over Booker, it wasn't even a question for me.
Well, I will say this. I think I may have just found my pivot for my Fool's Gold Player of the Week. And I guess we could talk about him again in a little bit if I decide to go that route. But I think that's it for waiver wire pickups. Like I said, most of your waivers have already probably hit. Some people out there do it a little bit differently. And for you, there you go. There's some waiver wire pickups this week.
Real quick, I want to piggyback on the Booker. Me and Jacob talk extensively about this, and this is the best example when we talk handcuffs for the non-believers of handcuffs. The reason we didn't mention Booker is because if you're a Saquon owner and you did not own Booker, that's the mistake. So keep that in mind. Handcuffs save weeks. So
Booker, Madison, Chuba, those guys that belong to elite running backs, you need them on your roster. Some people will bring up the debate about, no, I'd rather have someone I can utilize. To hoot with that. You want the security, and that's where the security lies.
Guys, I woke up in Dynasty this morning and Devontae Booker was on the waiver. And waivers had already processed. And in the last 2 weeks, I've managed to somehow secure Damian Williams, who's the starter for the next 4 weeks, and Devontae Booker, plus the trade I made with Justin. I mean, I went from having no running back depth to all of a sudden just rostering these guys, and through injuries, now I have like 6 starting running backs.
Joe, we can't talk about how bad the people in our league is. People aren't going to believe what we're saying on the podcast. So we're going to move on to our sleepers, which we call here our dark horses of the week. Let's take a little bit of a recap. Like I said, Jacob, Justin, you've been holding it down the last couple of weeks. Let's review those dark horses from last week. Jacob went with Jalen Waddle at Tampa Bay. Unfortunately, the writing was on the wall that it was going to be a good week for Jalen Waddle, and that was just not the case against that weak Tampa Bay secondary with Jacoby Brissett throwing him the ball. Justin, you went with Damian Harris. I don't understand Jacob's notes here.
I'll tell you.
Go too high because I thought he fell in the end zone a few times. How did you?
Yeah, no. So with the Damian Harris versus Houston, we've been agreeing to pushes if it borderline meets the Yahoo projection overall, but I always own up to it. That was a flat out miss. If he didn't fumble crossing the end zone plane, that would have been a big hit for me. But Harris has a fumbling problem, and it's just he could have had potential for a 15+ point week, but those fumbles killed him. I think he fumbled twice, to be honest, but
he fumbled going into the end zone. I didn't get to watch the game.
He got strip fumbled going to the end zone, and then in the red zone within the 5, I think he got stripped again, but they recovered. But he's just having problems overall holding on to the ball. But he could have had a touchdown right there, but he missed in the sake of dark horse for sure start. He definitely missed last week.
That's an 8-point swing, right? So if he gets that additional 8 points, then it's a huge hit. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about that also, but not only that, but the Colts ran it back for almost a touchdown. They got in, but they called them out. But it was a huge play in the game overall. I think they played the Colts.
Houston.
Maybe I'm thinking something else. Either way, he got stripped. It was awful. Bad miss.
Before we get into the rest of our dark horses for this week, the commission himself. Hey, guys, have fun. Look at that. Dad's watching over us, guys. Thanks, Dad. We appreciate you. Let's see what he also said. Drop Galladay in 10-team leagues if you have to. That's just because Jacob's been the biggest advocate.
Jacob, I just want to point out, man, and you and I, we were drinking one night at DeMont's house, and you told me, when Galladay's healthy, he's a top 10 wide receiver, and I was going to take your money. We were going to do it on a week-by-week basis, but I didn't. And I want to let you know I'm a good friend because I told you, no, that's such a dumb bet. I won't even take it.
Let's see. He also said, my picks sucked. Good. I'm glad you acknowledged that. He even auto-corrected himself. Jacob, you're supposed to be taking the night off, man. Come on. And then he also said Gaskin had the weak Waddle shit.
Gaskin went berserk.
Good. Gaskin is good, man. It's about time Miami unleashes him this year, right? It's about time.
Yeah, Gaskin's definitely the back to own. It's unfortunate that
when he's used, he's great, but when he's not used, it's like, why not? So,
well, yeah.
Sooner or later, if they want to win, and with Tua coming back, it's a recipe for success for Gaskin if they figure it out there.
Yeah.
Let's get into our dark horses now. I'll lead us off. I was teetering on the fence with Emmanuel Sanders at first, but I think we all kind of came to the conclusion that, hey, you know what? That doesn't fit the dark horse style,
this
right?
was my dark horse too, Gabe, by the way.
Oh, was it? Well, then
no. I didn't pick this.
Okay, cool.
But it was my second. I wanted to go with this, but I'm glad you did.
Awesome. Well, I'll take it from here then. I'm going with Javonte Williams, running back for the Denver Broncos. I think we all have heard now the turmoil that has blown up in Las Vegas. That is the Gruden experiment. It has come to an end. We won't get into too much detail about it. I'm sure you've already read it for yourself. But with that being said, there's a very good chance that this team might be in shambles. There's a very good chance that Derek Carr is in his last year. There's a very good chance that the team itself could be looking to change the course of its season. And if that means losing a few games in a row to get a better pick, I can totally see it happening. But as a Raiders fan, I will say with a disclaimer, Raiders are going to the Super Bowl. Let's see it, baby. Just win. But in any case, they are totally beatable on the ground. It is through the air where they have given teams trouble. Of course, Justin Herbert sees no trouble with that. But I do think they kind of settle down against a guy like Bridgewater who likes to keep it short and mid-range. I think they find success to stop him. But where they aren't going to be able to stop are the guys that have been sharing the backfield there, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. I think you can start them both. They've both been seeing 10-plus carries week in and week out. It's only a matter of time before one of them breaks off that 50-yard run that we saw Melvin do over the last couple of weeks ago. And they're also seeing quite a few targets. I mean, 5 targets in the backfield is good, especially if you catch 3 of them and tack on 30 yards. So that's 6 points right there in PPR leagues. And then you just add a cherry on top for what he's doing on the ground. The key to this dark horse is if he falls in the end zone. I'm projecting Javonte Williams easy for 15-plus fantasy points. Right now, Yahoo has him sitting right around 10. That is my dark horse of the week, Javonte Williams, running back for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
Any debates, rebuttals? Joe, you said you like it. We can keep on going.
I love it. Listen, man, just to touch on the Javonte, he has been killing Melvin Gordon. He's up to something like 6.2 yards a carry, while Melvin Gordon is fighting his way to 3.5 yards per carry, and somehow they're still splitting, and Melvin's actually getting a little bit more touches. Dude, it's disgusting. And you know what? Melvin missed practice today with a hip injury. And if he does not play this week, which we don't know, he's getting kind of up there in age, so those guys sometimes take a veteran day and sometimes it's serious. But either way, I think this is a breakout game for Javonte, and I think this is the turning point in the season for the Broncos running backs to where Javonte now becomes startable on a week-in, week-out basis. That's my call right now.
I love to hear it. And yeah, you mentioned it too. It kind of touched on to what we were talking about earlier in the podcast, where you see a player like Melvin Gordon. I think he has somewhere north of like 55 fantasy points. And then you look at someone like Javonte, and he's got like 15 or 20 less fantasy points than Melvin Gordon right now on the season. But he's just looked so much better. If you actually watch the football games, he's got the juice. Melvin Gordon's just kind of got the, I'm going to fall forward every time and pick up some yardage. And it's, we talk a lot about these rookies, and they really come to fruition in the second half of the season. We're not even there yet, but I'm saying, hey, it might start a little bit earlier for a guy like Javonte Williams.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Jacob's not here today. We'll get his if he decides to comment and continue to work while he's off. But I'm going to move it over to Justin. Justin, who is your dark horse of the week?
I'm going to go Chase Edmonds. I saw the game against the Niners, and if you saw that, you don't want anything to do with him. He's getting vultured by Connor, but that game was very unique, and you're a Niner fan, Joe. You know what it is. So he fumbled. He caught only 3 off of 4 targets for like 16 yards, only rushed 6 times. Overall, offensively, it was a very uncharacteristic game for everybody, specifically the Cardinals. I think this week against a high offense Browns, who did something very unique last week, throwing 42 plus, I think that the Cardinals have a lot of room to score. They're going to need to score, and Chase Edmonds is finally going to find the end zone on the ground this year off like a 40-yard bust. And RB2 securely, that's where I'm putting him. He's projected for 12.5. I'll say easily above.
Above. Joe?
Edmonds has been getting, I don't even want to say it's vultured necessarily, because we knew Connor was coming in to be the goal line back, right? And Connor's such a bigger guy, but it just sucks because Edmund has put up, and obviously we're in a PPR league, 14.5, 12.5, 14.5, 23 prior to this last week. And he hasn't found the end zone. How many running backs can say that? I mean his production is solid.
You said 23, but I think he got a 5-point bonus because we play in a specific league. He's more around like 17, 18 on that week. But yeah, he hasn't got into the end zone at all. That's what I'm trying to say. You get it? He booms.
Yeah, I agree. I like that pick against the Browns.
I think the reason I'm okay with putting him as a dark horse because this time of the year, receivers are coming up, and if most people aren't probably running Chase as a RB2, they're more running him as a flex, and they might pivot after a bad game. That's why I'm secure in him being an RB2 this week.
Yeah.
RB2 for a guy that has Chase Edmonds. I like to hear it. Joe, we're going to end with you. Who's your dark horse of the week?
Yeah. I'm going to go with the guy that I was super high on coming into the season, and that's T. Higgins. And, I don't necessarily know that you're planning on benching him, but I just see a really big week ahead for him. They're coming up against Detroit's secondary, which I don't know that it's necessarily been great or bad, but I think that they're going to blow them out. And the other thing is he's been getting a good amount of targets. Even last week, yes, he only had 32 yards, but he did have 7 targets, and he caught 5 of those balls. And he had a 2-point conversion, by the way. So he still got you 10 points in PPR league. I think that this is the week where he gets back on track as Burrow's favorite target. And I don't think Chase is going anywhere. But I do think that Higgins and Chase are obviously the 2 to own over there. And Boyd, when those guys are healthy, is the juju of this team. He's just not relevant when they're both healthy. So I think that Higgins and Chase both have good weeks. But I think that Higgins is projected to have, 14.6 points. And I think that he hits that pretty easily. So, yeah, I'll go 15 and up for him. And I think that you might even be able to expect 20 as he gets in that zone.
Yeah, I like T. Higgins. I like the volume.
Guys, because Chase has how many touchdowns? 6 touchdowns in 5 games?
Yeah, and he's not the target guy. He's the high touchdown guy on very limited targets. T. Higgins was getting targets when he was actually healthy. Tyler Boyd was getting targets when he's actually healthy. So those are those sneaky PPR guys that you can slide in there. Justin?
Let me explain that misconception about Chase because, we heard the offseason hits about him having soft hands. And then he just comes out lights out.
He's got the best hands in football is what it looks like.
I hit up my little brother. He's a Packer fan. And I'm watching my stats. And I'm like, man, I need a Chase bomb right about now. He's like, hell no, that's not happening. 10 seconds later, damn it, he did it. I don't know if you saw the play. He turned a nice pass into a 70-yard touchdown. The dude is electric. He just burns people too at the same time. If you watch Burrow last year, Boyd was your mid-range PPR guy. AJ Green was sprinkled in, and Higgins was your long ball sideline deep threat. Well, what happened now? Chase is a much better sideline deep threat than Higgins. Can Higgins convert to a 10 to 30-yard guy himself? I don't know. Boyd is definitely on the outs with those two, but I think Chase, he got 10 targets last week, and Higgins played too. Who's to say he's not getting more targets than Higgins? He might just be. I want them both, but maybe Chase is just beasting, and it's just what it is.
Listen, Chase is with time, Chase is better, and he's going to be better. I just think that Higgins is also really good. Listen, guys, coming into the season after the draft, we were all so hyped. Man, Chase goes back to Cincinnati to play with his LSU buddy and Burrow. Everybody was stoked. I mean, the hype on him was so high. Some of us were saying top 15. I remember I did a podcast and I said the days of waiting for wide receivers to blow up is gone with Justin Jefferson and Ayuk after the year that we just saw them have, and that Chase was going to come out and kill it. All of a sudden, we get into the depths of preseason, and he drops a couple passes. I think it was like 3 passes. And all of a sudden, they're sitting there saying, oh, forget about him. Jacob got him in like the 8th or 9th round in one of our leagues. And I told him that night, I said, bro, this is the steal of the draft. That's insane. Because it went from, yes, the hype is so real, to one report about soft hands, and now suddenly everybody thinks, oh, he's not going to be good. Come on, man. The guy was taken 5th overall. We knew that he was a stud. And I'm not saying that 5th overall picks can't bust, but I'm just saying he's a monster.
Yeah, he also came out and said that the NFL ball is a little different. That really hurt him.
Yeah, he said it's bigger than the college ball and blah, blah, blah. But
it doesn't matter, obviously.
He's just covering for himself, man.
Yeah, covering his
passes.
Guy's a beast. He's in your lineup, as well as T. Higgins this week. Gentlemen, it's time for the not so great news. The fool's gold players this week. The players that look good, you might want to start them. We're telling you, temper your expectations. I'll start off again, only because we talked about this, and I'm taking a little bit of an easy way out. I'm going with Miles Sanders, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. I didn't have enough time to pivot, but that's what I'm doing. Look, you might look on your Yahoo thing and see, wow, Tampa Bay is actually vulnerable. They're 20th in the league. Like, that's not too bad. That's because Gaskin absolutely is an anomaly, and he gashed them last week with his 2 touchdowns and 10 targets through the air. Miles Sanders isn't seeing those kind of targets, and when he is, he's not doing a lot with them. And ultimately, where Tampa Bay really does succeed is stopping the run game. And that's where Sanders is getting his work if he is seeing it. And it's just not been his way. I'm telling you right now, he's not a flex option this week. He's definitely not a running back 2 option. He's not a flex option. He's a complete sit. And I know, Joe, you were comfortable with saying that before the podcast even began. You were like, bro, you got to go even deeper than that because there are people out there who aren't even starting him right now. You feel that way for sure, yeah?
Well, I'll say last week actually was a step in the right direction. Although he did nothing. He had 5 catches, I think, all like literally in the first quarter because I'm watching it and I'm like, I just traded him to Jacob. And I see he gets 5 catches. I'm like, wait, how does he have 5.6 yards when he has 5 catches? He got 6 yards on 5 catches. That just goes to show. Listen, his upside, and I was the biggest Miles Sanders supporter coming into the year. I actually thought, Hurts was going to raise the ceiling on this guy. But Hurts just kills his ceiling, man. Because if they get anywhere within the goal line, throw running out of the question. If they're in a run, it's Hurts. So that takes away his touchdown upside, which last week he had 10 points. Hurts did run it in for, I think, a 3-yard touchdown. You give that to Sanders, and now he has a 16-point game, which is not a bad game. But I think that is out of the question now. Now you have Gainwell coming in and taking some of his targets. I'm not saying that it's going to be all bad. Maybe he can figure it out. He's talented. But until he puts up one of those patented 15-point games or even shows me that he can get 120 yards on the ground, even if it's not a huge game, I'm not touching this man. I am starting guys like Rondale Moore over him in one league. I'm starting Kadarius Toney without even thinking twice about it. So until he does something, he's not seeing my lineup.
He put up a very crazy stat, and his 5 targets, or what was it, 8 targets, he had negative 32 air yards. You know what that means?
Catching balls behind the line.
Yeah.
It was in like he was getting awesome looks, but he didn't do anything with them. He was getting it behind the line of scrimmage severely and had to make something. So the fact it ended up positive, hey, it's good. But his recipe to success is just getting targets and a little bit of rushes. But with Jalen Hurts, you hit it on the head.
Yeah, it's always a volume thing for half of these running backs. It's a volume issue, right? We talk about it all the time. You give Miles Sanders 20 touches or 20 touches / targets, and he's going to go out and get you solid RB2 numbers like we saw part of last year. But if you're getting him sporadic touches 5 where he's catching the ball 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, you're not going to expect a huge game from him. And look at Zach Moss as a perfect example. This year, they're putting him in a place to succeed, and they're giving him 15 touches a game. And now, all of a sudden, he is starter-worthy. Mm-hmm. But last year, they didn't get – it was sporadic. It was 7 touches this game and 7 and 10 the next game. And he was never a starter. And now they've said, let's put him in a place to succeed, and he's doing good, and he should be in your lineup as a flex. So
he should be in your lineup in a flex when the Bills are blowing teams out by 25 points every game, which is what they've been doing. He gets a lot of garbage time work, but nonetheless, it's volume nonetheless, and he gets some carries in the first half too. Yeah, Zach Moss, I'm starting him in a number of leagues this week. When in the beginning of the year, I didn't want to touch him at all, and now I am. So yeah, not a bad pick, but that was mine, Miles Sanders. Let's move on. Justin, Fool's Gold Player of the Week. Who you got, man?
I'm going with the Ravens backfield in general. And I know Joe wasn't too happy with me picking this because he's like, who the hell is starting any of them?
Both of y'all took cop-outs this week.
Let me tell you, no, because we're going in bye weeks. We're going in weeks where running backs are injured.
Touche, Justin.
This matters, and I'm not saying, guys, if you have James Robinson, you're gonna want to start them over Latavius Murray. I'm not saying that. That's the obvious. What I'm saying is, if you have Latavius or you have Tony Pollard, I'm starting Tony Pollard over Latavius. I don't care starter versus backup. I'm gonna start Miles Sanders definitely over all of them. But when you like in a bye week, I have to choose between backup running backs. That's what bye weeks do to me, and I'm like, damn, do I really want to start Latavius or Tyson? No, I'm starting Pollard. I'm starting McKissick. I'm gonna hope they get a little bit more action because not only are they bad, but Lamar is a vulture in himself. So I don't want any piece of that. So my advice is bench any of those Ravens and start your stud handcuffs that get run regardless. I would definitely start James Conner, hoping he just gets the touchdown, than any of those guys. That's where I'm living with this call.
No.
Yeah, man. Hey, I like that you brought up the bye weeks. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's such a good point. Joe, anything to add?
No, I think when he puts it like that, I hear what you're saying. You know, if you're deciding between Latavius and all those guys you mentioned, Pollard and Connor and Miles Sanders, I mean, I get it. It's bye weeks. I'm starting Javonte Williams as my RB2, and, you know, I do like him. He was your dark horse of the week, but to be honest, he hasn't proved a whole lot yet, right? In terms of fantasy-wise, he's a great player, so it is a little bit of a risk. But I am starting Javonte over Latavius, and honestly, I didn't even think twice about it. So, yeah, I see what he's saying. You know, at this point, you're picking between very low-end starters and backup running backs, a lot of people. So, yeah, I get it.
Well, you took a nice angle there. And again, that's the entire Ravens backfield this week. They're fool's gold. Watch out. Be careful. Joe, we're going to end it with you, your fool's gold player of the week.
Yeah, man. So I put Tyler Lockett here, and I think I went a little bit more bold than either of you guys. I mean, I get it. It's still a little bit, you know, Geno Smith coming in. Here's the thing, man. Tyler Lockett, some reason, finishes top 15 as a wide receiver every year. But every year for the past, I want to say 3 years, it's up and down with this guy. It's 40 points one game, 5 the next. And when he goes, he goes. And when he doesn't, he doesn't. And we're going into a game where he's playing Pittsburgh. And I get it, Pittsburgh has been shredded. But I still think that there's time for their defense to get right. And I still think that their secondary is pretty decent. And he's projected 15.3 points. And the last 3 weeks, he's put up 7, 6, and 10. I don't think week 1 with out Russell Wilson is the week that he hits that 15. I'm not necessarily saying you're putting him on your bench either. It's bye weeks. You probably don't have a better option. You know, so obviously you're starting him. It's more of a temper your expectations. I don't think he's hitting that 15-point mark this week.
And you sum it up perfectly with the temper your expectations. Just really quick, I know Justin's got a little bit of a rebuttal there or some comment with the whoa. But temper your expectations. That's the fool's gold way. You know, we're not saying these guys are going to completely tank. We're just saying, hey, there might be better options. Or if you got to brunt the force of starting them, then do it with something in your throat.
Well, put it this way, Gabe. In some leagues, you have 5 wide receivers. I have 5 wide receivers that are all startable, I might add, right? And if you're in that kind of a situation where, listen, some people found themselves drafting Jamar Chase in the 9th round and grabbing a steal with Kadarius Toney off the waiver wire. It happens, man. Deebo Samuel in the 10th round or the 7th round, wherever he was going. There's scenarios where guys are stacked on wide receivers, and I think if you're sitting in an option where you might be like one of my teams where you're looking at it and you're saying, man, you know what? I didn't really get hurt by these bye weeks, and I have 7 or 8 guys that I want to start. Well, I might keep locking on the bench over, I'm just saying.
Justin, what was that last rebuttal you want to get in before we close out the show? We're actually going to finish before an hour today, guys. Good news.
No, we have one more thing to discuss after this, but I'll tell you this. First of all, if the Ravens' backfield is a cop-out, Lockett only scored 5 more points than Latavius Murray in the last 3 weeks, so it's not like he's been killing it. He's been doing awful, actually. But if you watch their games, he's 2 balls away from 30 points. That's the Lockett. That's the Tyreek Light. And I'm going to go so far as to counter and say this boy goes crazy this weekend. The Pittsburgh Steelers have awful defense versus wide receivers. They've given up the 3rd most statistically. I disagree overall. but I do think you can pivot from him if you don't like to play the high risk, high reward type game. But to say he's a bust, I'm countering it. I go against it, and I'm down to book it down.
That's what I was looking for. The book it down.
Well,
Can we
here's
get a
the
book it
thing.
down, fellas?
You mentioned that Latavius and Lockett are within 5 points of each other. Okay, we're in 5 leagues. I'm in 5 leagues. I don't know a single league where Lockett is on the bench, and I don't have a single league where Latavius is in a starting lineup. That's me. I'm in 10-man leagues, so I don't know. But I'm just saying, in my 5 leagues, Lockett is on the starting lineup for every single one, and Latavius is not. Now, you're right. 5 points separates the two over the last 3 weeks. It's not that big of a difference, and that's kind of my point. Is Lockett hasn't been great, but the conception around him is he's a must-start player, right? Nobody even considers it. It's not, well, Tony's been balling, I'm going to start him over Lockett. It's Lockett goes in my lineup. It's a set it and forget it. We don't even think about it. So I will take a book it down on that, and I will say that the Yahoo projection, and listen, we talk about it, man. Lockett is one of those players where he just can catch one bomb for 70 yards and go to the house, and he can beat the projection on one catch.
He's at 15.3.
So he's at 15.3. I'll say under on that for sure.
I say over easy.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think this is the week where Seattle feels like things are not going so great. Russell Wilson is out. Their playoff hopes are done. The Steelers are looking at this, licking their chops, saying, oh, wow, we had the best defense in the league last year, and they haven't lived up to the hype. It's time to get back on track, boys.
Judge rules in favor. Oh, go ahead. Last bit. Come on.
Gabe, where do you fall on the book it down? You got to pick a side.
Well, I was going to pick a side and then close this out. So, Justin, last take.
First of all, we got to review last week's Fool's Gold. Second of all, this is why we need more people on here, because me and Jacob never book it down because we're so stingy. But with more people, we get some action. Lockett's going to go crazy. Gino's going to go crazy. They're going to kill the Steelers and then fall back to earth.
You know, hey.
No way. I'll book that down too. That the Steelers are
we go fantasy numbers. I don't bet on.
True. All right. I'm predicting Najee Harris is going to be the RB1 this week. I mean, he's gonna be the RB1, but some guy's gonna randomly break out for 35. But either way, like Gaskin last week. But either way, Najee is the RB1 this week against Seattle's awful defense, and Deontay finds his legs. Claypool finds his legs. The Steelers' defense finds their legs, and Seattle takes a beat down that is biblical proportions.
I love it. Fine. Really quick. I know Justin mentioned it. Last week's Fool's Gown. We're kind of like going backwards, reverse here. We'll touch on it really quickly. Jacob, Melvin, and Javonte, the guys who we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago, those guys were Fool's Gold players last week. That was a hit. They didn't do so well against Pittsburgh. Justin, you went CEH. Of course it was a hit. He got injured. So, lucky for you and sad for him.
Listen to my calls. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, because Justin's got a
come on,
backseat.
Even if he didn't get hurt, he wasn't going to do anything that game.
I mean, judging off Darrell Williams' production, I don't know. But
Darrell's a better runner.
We'll give it the hit.
All right, back to the Lockett news, and I'll close this out. The judge rules in favor of – I'm siding with Joe on this one. With that being said, it is it for us on the First Round Fantasy Podcast. You already know where to follow us. If you don't, it's First Round Fantasy on YouTube, First Round Fantasy, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. The merch, it's always in the link below. Support us. And if you really want to support us and you don't have money – just like and subscribe. We guarantee you a win in your fantasy matchup this week. And also find Joe on, I don't know, OfferUp or something. He's always We're closing it out with that. We'll see you guys next week. Good luck with all your fantasy matchups. Peace.